James D. Wilcox is the editor for 13 Lives. I'm Matt Noble of Golf Derby. Wanted to kick things off by asking you, James, what was the sort of most important cut you made in telling this story?
The most important cut. Wow, that is an interesting question because there are so many in
Yeah.
there. I think that it's hard to nail it down to one cut. I would say the first cut that I made was probably the last cut that I made when I knew we movie like firmly wrapped up.
Hmm. Do you remember that? Like maybe not even just first cut, but that first scene that you had to piece together for the film?
Yeah, I remember. So I went over to London where I cut the film, and usually there's a small scene that I'm asked to cut that just kind of, we making sure the cameras are working right and the look is set and it's early for the actors to kind of get warmed up into character. So there was a small scene that plays at the end of the film when the mother, Chai's mother, Burhan, she shows up at the hospital and finally it's the opportunity to see her son after the 18-day ordeal. So that was the first scene that I cut. But really, the first big scene that I cut came in the next day. And it was the beginnings of when the UK divers discovered the boys. So that was a huge scene because it's a pivotal moment in the film on day 10 when they find the boys. And usually a scene like that is pushed back a little further so that we could get like our underwater bearing straight, all the direction, the underwater storytelling, set the look. And I mean, there were many, many tests, but it's a huge scene that I cut early on because we also didn't have Viggo, Colin. Initially, we were using stunt doubles, and we found out quite a bit in using the stunt doubles because they wouldn't show their faces. So in communicating that with Ron, which he knew that, we finally got days scheduled for Viggo to swim and Colin to dive. And I started putting that together with the stunt doubles and more that they shot on for that first rescue dive. I eventually used almost exclusively all of Viggo and Colin getting back to Chamber 9 where the boys were discovered.
Wow. There's so it's interesting, the film, because you don't see much of the boys in the cave until they are discovered. So like they really are a mystery in the film of when they're going to come and like their journey and stuff. So like for you, what was like important how you revealed those boys when they are discovered that first time?
Matt, I love that in the script, once the boys ride into the cave, and we meet them on the soccer pitch, and then we get to know that it's a birthday party going on for one of the main kids that night. And then they decide they have a little time, they go into the cave. Once they go into the cave with the coach, we never see them again. And I thought it was brilliant because our minds are left to wonder, what shape were they in? Are they even alive? And even though, based on the reality, the outcome of that story, that the boys ultimately do survive, and the coach, they survive, but it creates such doubt in your mind that you just don't know what shape they're in. And then the other thing that I loved about it was it took on the point of view of the British divers. So they were the first ones to discover the boys. So that shaped a lot of my storytelling, which ended up being very personable and very point of view. So they found the boys first. And that was just amazing because the film has so many ebbs and flows that was a big win for the audience to see that, oh, great, the boys have been found, but now the real trouble begins. How do they get them out?
And I think that like with the film, what you have is it tells really this story of sort of having to solve a problem. Like they've got these boys, they've got to get them out, got to think, how can we possibly do this? And while the stakes are not as high in filmmaking, I imagine as an editor, you often have to think of creative solutions to problems that you encounter. And how are we going to figure this out? It's just not going to work. Can you think of a time in this film where you had to come up with a creative solution to a problem?
Many, many times. I mean, first of all, if you're unorganized, on a project like this that has a total of 382 hours of film to go through with specific geography underwater and specific challenges underwater, along with the base camp and the water rescue and diversion that's going on up on the mountain and the villagers and the sacrificing. There's so many plates that are spinning that in itself, to just solve that and get the
Mm.
audience to understand the degree of difficulty that the divers have to go through to rescue the boys, and conversely, what the boys have to go through to survive. Because it was 10 days without any really clean drinking water. The water that only was inside the cave, dripping down from inside, is what they had to survive on, and they didn't have any food. So all of those things were really tricky to solve, but specifically, there were lots of things that happened. When the UK divers went in, well, first of all, when the Thai Navy SEALs went in, they only went to a certain point, T junction, and they brought a red guideline with them.
Mm.
And then when the UK divers went in, they decided that they would bring a blue line so that it would be clear to see where the divers, the Navy SEALs left off and where the UK divers began. And then they took that guideline all the way back to Chamber 9 to where the boys were holed up. And that was interesting because when we were shooting in production, oftentimes the spool, the amount of line that was used, they just shot it. And sometimes it was out of line, sometimes it was the wrong color line. And so we had to go through carefully and go, okay, this is where the Thai Navy SEALs made it to. This is where the UK divers take over. So we, in visual effects, we had to go and put blue line back on those spools and make sure that it was enough to get them all the way back to finally Chamber 9. So there were lots and lots of things to solve. The timeline, trying to get people to understand the urgency and the geography. The boys were like a mile and a half back there, which is crazy to think that they would be that far back in a cave. But I think, Matt, perhaps the biggest thing, the biggest problem to solve and the biggest challenge of the film is, the outcome of how do you maintain suspense along the way to have the audience disengage from the outcome that they know about and just take part in the journey and the actual rescue. And what are those details that need to be revealed that the audience doesn't know?
Mm. Yeah, no, that is a good point, and like it is interesting to see like people who might be watching this film like years in the future who won't know the outcome and what eyes they'll view the film with when they're sort of like learning more of the stuff. But really, what do you think's the most incredible thing about this story that you're telling in this film?
Well, I mean, just the story itself is a series of 13 miracles,
Mm.
truly miracles. And then the ingenuity that people came up with to create this scenario whereby they could even be considered, if not one or two or three or four of them to be rescued, but all 13 of them to be rescued. And I think the story of the heroes, the real life heroes involved, the volunteers, the fact that over 5,000 people, it depends on who you talk to, the number of people who came to volunteer for the story itself. We just don't see stories like this. And it's a one of a kind story. All the sacrifice from the villagers, the efforting from the Thai people, the UK divers who had this unique ability to dive in environments like that just so happened to be the right guys, the right team and community of divers for this particular amazing story. And just the anatomy of all of that and how it came together is really, I'm in awe of it. I just cannot stop thinking about how amazing and incredible the rescue was, and that it was successful. Two people lost their lives in the process of it, but it's just really, really incredible. And that's one of the things Ron Howard had talked to me about early on when we were discussing the script and going over it. And he just kept saying, James, this has to be the anatomy of a miracle. And that meant in every possible way. It was the efforts from the divers, the Thai people, spirituality, the prayer involved, what the parents had to go through, the agonizing moments that the parents weren't told anything, and then the revelation of how they actually did it, how they actually pulled this incredible journey off, this incredible rescue.
Mm. I imagine the relationship between an editor and director is always different depending on who that editor and who that director is. What was something that was sort of unique about Ron and working for him on this film that you hadn't experienced on other projects?
Well, this is our third collaboration together.
Mm.
So first it was the series Genius,
Mm-hmm.
and then after Genius, we worked together on Hillbilly Elegy,
Mhm.
and now the success of 13 Lives. So there's been a lot of chemistry developed along the way, and a lot of mutual trust and respect and instinctual learning from one another, and just trying different things to the best of the film and stress testing the film
Mm.
like we would do on any project to just make sure that it's truly working in the most authentic way possible. So for Ron, what's really unique that I love is that, first of all, he's very personable. He's a funny guy in the cutting room. We work a lot of long hours, and he just keeps it all light and within reason. And there's times where I'm lobbying really hard for a particular story point to get in that he may feel like, well, you know what, we'll revisit that. But for right now, let's take it out, and then I'll mention it again, and then it'll creep its way back into the film, and then eventually we show it to an audience and we screen it, and they help us inform our decision as to whether or not this story, this particular beat belongs in the film or out of it, because it's filmmaking. It's the art of it all. And no one knows for certain. You have a core story that you're rolling with, but you just don't really know how things are going to land with the audience. And then lastly, I would say as a director, that's the personable side of him, the chemistry between us. But as a director, he's a brilliant storyteller. And especially, he's so caring about what happens with people and the fascination of what people are capable of doing. And as a director, Ron always gives me quite a lot of footage. So he actually shoots for the edit, and he knows what he has, and he trusts that his plan is going to work editorially, but he also wants to see how I see the material and the style of which I choose to put the material together. Gives me total freedom that way. So it's a very special relationship that he and I have. And then we're also friends too. So that goes a long way as well.
Oh, that's nice. Can you think, is there a beat you snuck into this film that you sort of like worked your way back into this film that made the final thing?
Oh yeah, there were on this film. First of all, my cut, Matt, was 5 hours long. We had so much to go through. It was 5 hours,
Yeah,
and there's
well,
no way that we could begin to really show anybody a film that's 5 hours long. I don't care how
yeah,
dynamic the film may have been,
no,
and it also
I agree.
stopped other departments from working. You couldn't start on sound. You couldn't start on visual effects. You couldn't screen the
Mm,
movie until you got it within a reasonable time. So
mm,
there were lots that had to come out. And one of the things that I sold Ron on was when the villagers sacrificed their rice fields for the sake of finding the boys. I knew what I thought that meant to the Thai culture, that it was a massive setback
mm,
financially.
mm,
And of course, the villagers weren't thinking about their income versus saving the lives of their young boys. But in the end, in the end credits, you see that there's a summarization of what happened with the villagers and that they were offered compensation. And I just kept bringing that up and bringing that up. And he listened to me, and he finally said, you know what? I found something I think you might like. He sent me an article before I was starting work one morning, and it was that the Thai government did offer compensation to the villagers. And
mm.
that made its way into the film as part of the final wrap up as to here's what happened with the boys had they not gotten out of the cave. Here's what happened with the villagers. Here's what happened with their citizenship being navigated. So there was quite a lot. There was another moment also where when the mother kind of gets really upset with the governor because she's gone out of patience. They have not told her anything. Before that, there was a scene where the governor was put on the spot to go and address the parents. And that moment in this film where he's telling the parents, he's kind of lying to them, or at least giving them false assurances. I'll say that. And she's looking at him, and something in her gut just doesn't believe it. And that scene had come out of the film. And I convinced Ron, we have to put that back in. because I think it gives her foundation for the explosive scene when she confronts the governor thereafter. So
Mm.
there were a lot of scenes like that that we, we contracted, we pulled out, we put back in, we made smaller versions of it, we moved things around, and he trusts me implicitly to be able to get that done.
Mm. You said that from working with him, you always learn something. You're always learning from each other, and this doesn't have to be something you learnt from Ron. But what is something you learnt, James, from this project?
Wow. How important point of view is in storytelling, how important, how personal it becomes, and how important redundancy is. Like, it just is in your way because of the nature of that length of the film being 5 hours.
Mm.
We had to go through and look for all those redundant beats, and so the audience was really getting a lot of what we were doing, and we didn't have to go back and repeat it. For instance, if we once we showed the process by which the first boy was brought out successfully, we didn't have to show that full process again,
Mm.
because then the audience could anticipate what's going on. And that was the thing that we didn't want to do. We wanted to create suspense and tension and underwater scenes, claustrophobia, and just the overall busyness that was going on, and the stakes that we remained high. So I did learn a lot in terms of just telling the audience only what they needed to know. And it was also about showing them what they needed to know and not necessarily telling them. So it was the power of nonverbal storytelling that I really, really, I knew it. I've done it my entire career, but never was it more important than on 13 Lives.
Yeah, hard to get a lot of dialogue in when you're like swimming through like a cave, like through channel with the mask on and everything like that. Yeah. So really good. Just I want to ask you, James, like when you watch other projects, like what stands out to you as good editing? How do you like see good editing in it? What are you looking for when you're watching another film or another TV series? What
Right,
makes
that's
good
an
editing for
excellent
you?
question. What is good editing? I would say, in a word, I think it's connection to the material, the audience connecting emotionally in some kind of way with the material, whether it's a moment of levity for comedy, whether it's drama, suspense, a reveal of new information, just how the audience is leaning into that. And however the pacing or the style of which that editing is presented, because it goes all the way back to the core script and how that script is laid out, and then what you choose to do after the script is written, how it's directed, how it's acted, and then how it's going to be cut. But I really think that the best thing about editing is that connection, that personal connection, the journey that you can take the audience on.
Mm.
And in a film like 13 Lives, it's a unique opportunity sonically, because you won't hear the kinds of things you would normally hear in everyday life, being immersed underwater in caves. And not very many people, even if they have diving experience, will ever want to or desire to go into a cave and dive. So it's a unique opportunity to experience something without truly in real life experiencing it.
Yeah. Was there a film or show that made you want to be an editor or made you fall in love with editing?
I mean, I've watched films all
Yeah.
my life. I mean, I initially, the thing that I really loved about editing was I grew up watching a lot of martial arts films,
Mm.
and Bruce Lee was,
Mm.
I was just enamored. I thought I could be the next Bruce Lee. And me and my buddies would go see Bruce Lee in these matinees, and we come out and, kicking each other and chopping each other on the neck. And it was just the whole magic of cinema that I thought, man, this is just incredible. And I, at that point, didn't necessarily know that I was going to become an editor.
Mm.
I hadn't fallen in love with it at that point. It was just movie making and the magic of it, and just the whole experience of being in this darkened theater and the popcorn and just everyone having a great time and coming out and continuing to think about the film and re-examine it and unravel it, and how did they do this, and I wonder how they did that. And so that does speak to my core instincts. I'm a very curious person about many, many things, but especially in mostly people.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Like in a film that you get to explore martial arts, action films, all the way to the Anatomy of a Miracle that's in 13 Lives. So James, thank you so much for chatting with us today at Gold Derby. People can go to our website, goldderby.com, to make your own awards predictions and join discussions in the forums and read our articles. And James, all the best of luck with the Oscars and the other film awards that are in the pipeline.
Matt, thank you so much. It was a pleasure and an honor to sit with you for Gold Derby, and best of luck to you as well.